This is the First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the First Century. Episode 25, Gaius, to the victor go the spoils, and Paul's revelation. Back in Rome, Gaius continued to win the favor and adulation of the Roman people. On June 26th, he made sacrifices at the altar of Providentia Augusta in the Campus Agrippae. This was significant in part because on the very same day, 33 years earlier, Tiberius had been adopted as heir by Augustus. Now, a few days later, on July 1st, Gaius whimsically decided to share the honor of consulship with his uncle Claudius, who considered that to be a true sign of respect. Prior to this time, Claudius had been considered an eques, not worthy of being named consul. He had even sought the consulship from Tiberius in 14 CE, but was summarily dismissed from even being considered by the emperor for that honor. Now, at least, Claudius could serve in that role due to the beneficence of his nephew. Herod Agrippa certainly benefited from Gaius's accession. Not only was he released from house arrest, but he received even more favor. Though Philip had died in 33-34 and his territories given to Syria, the revenues from those territories had been kept in a separate fund. Now, Gaius gave Herod Agrippa the title king and the accumulated assets from Philip's territories that had been kept in reserve. Gaius also gave Herod Agrippa the ornamenta praetoria, which was the right to wear the praetor's insignia. Though the right to wear the insignia conferred no actual power, it was a tremendous honor, not known to have been bestowed on a client king before. Agrippa was only too happy to receive the accolades and not so eager to travel to his territories. He remained in Rome and was determined to settle his debt to Antonia. To do so, he borrowed 1,000,000 drachmae from a Samaritan freedman of the deceased Tiberius. With those funds, he repaid Antonia. The leftover funds he used to impress Gaius, basically to strengthen his position with him, which in turn helped him rise in favor at court. Around the 31st of August, Caligula dedicated a temple to Divus Augustus. Caligula's birthday was August 31st, cementing his ties to Augustus rather than Tiberius. The Senate had authorized the temple to be built back in the year 14 when Augustus had died, but it had never been dedicated, which everyone took as a sign of Tiberius's lack of attention. The fact that Gaius finished and dedicated the temple only months after becoming princeps was another indication that there was a new man on the throne, and a blood relative of Augustus at that. The dedication was accompanied by the sacrifice of 400 bears. The following day, on September 1st, Claudius and Gaius relinquished the consulship so it could revert back to those who had held it prior. Then, on that same September 1st, the Senate proclaimed Gaius Pater Patriae, Father of the Country, one of the most prestigious titles that could be bestowed. There was still only one title that they could grant, but they did not yet, that of Augustus. Saul had such success with stamping out the followers of the way in Jerusalem that he intended to do the same in Damascus. He secured letters from the religious authorities to this effect and began his journey from Jerusalem to Damascus. It was later said that it was on this road that God revealed his Son to him. By the time he arrived in Damascus, Saul was no longer intending to stamp out the new movement. Now he wanted to tell people about his revelation. Based on his experience, he came to have faith in what God had done in the Anointed One, the Messiah, the Christ. Because of this revelation, he believed that Jesus was God's Son, the Anointed One. In Damascus, Paul met Ananias, a Jewish Christian living there. Ananias was initially apprehensive about receiving Paul, as he had heard about his persecuting the followers of the sect of the Nazarene. But after he had heard from Paul directly about his revelation, Ananias welcomed him and introduced him to others in the Damascus community. Saul then withdrew to Arabia to tell others about his revelation and his new insights, and he stayed there for about 3 years. Back in Jerusalem, Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, and Johanan, all of whom had been admirers and followers of Jesus, began writing down some of his more memorable sayings. There were so many quips, enigmatic statements, and profound actions, which were really signs pointing to who he was. It was important to reflect on Jesus' words and actions. Oftentimes, as they shared memories of their time with him, they could reach more profound insights and connect what he did and said with their own sacred texts. In Egypt, the Roman governor Aulus Flaccus had been having a successful administration. But now, with the passing of Tiberius and the rise of Caligula, he was nervous. He was nervous because he had been a friend and supporter of Tiberius as well as Gemellus. Further, Flaccus had been one who lobbed charges against Gaius' mother, Agrippina the Elder, leading to her own exile and execution. So, when some of the Jewish citizens of Alexandria asked to send an embassy of goodwill to the new emperor, Flaccus would not approve it. With Gaius on the throne, Flaccus wanted to keep a lid on the situation in Egypt. No need to attract the attention of the princeps, and certainly no need to support an embassy to the princeps which he could not control. The first 6 months of Gaius' reign were positive and hopeful. A princeps was in Rome after not having been there in more than 10 years. Further, Gaius was a direct descendant of Augustus, his great-grandson. Augustus had had only one biological child, Julia the Elder, who was eventually banished for immorality, but not before she had married Marcus Agrippa and given birth to Agrippina the Elder. Agrippina the Elder had been married to Germanicus and had several children, including Gaius, also known as Caligula. A biological great-grandson of Augustus was much more promising to the Romans than someone like Tiberius or his heirs, for he was merely the adopted son of Augustus. For some, the reign of Tiberius might even have been considered something of an aberration. But then, only after 6 months as princeps, Gaius became deathly ill, and his illness was a terrible time for the city. Senators, influential figures, and many more offered prayers and oaths for his recovery. One man, a plebeian, Publius Afranius Potitus, even promised under oath that he would rather die if that meant Gaius could live. The equestrian, Atanius Secundus, made a promise that he would fight as a gladiator if Gaius would ever recover. Many others made such promises as these too. Gaius, thinking that he was on death's door, even changed his will and named his favorite sister Drusilla as his heir. Next time, we'll learn about Gaius' recovery and his subsequent madness.